Hello everyone, my name is Mike Geig, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Game. Today we are talking about the Falconeer with Tomas Sala. Howdy Thomas, how you doing?
I'm good.
Fantastic. How you feeling?
I'm getting done with the sniffles, but yeah, it's the season.
Fair enough, yes. And in case you have a case of deja vu, I'll just be transparent. I forgot to start recording. We've been doing this part already, so we're going to do it again now that we have the video. Hi, everyone. That's what you get with production. Today we're talking about the Falconeer. And normally I say, like, we'll be talking about this game in this studio. But today it's like the Falconeer with just Tomas Sala, because you are a solo dev, which is a very interesting, a very first for us here. So how did that start? How did that come about?
Well, it's not something that happens in one day. So, I have always been someone who enjoyed working by himself. I think that's just a type, I guess. Trying to figure stuff out. I'm a 3D artist by trade. That's what I say. Well, I'm an interaction designer or whatever. But that's where I start, where my passion lies, being an artist. But I've always been the one that then wanted things to work. Or, I wanted the creature to walk, so then I learned how to animate, and then I wanted to be able to control how it walks or make the surroundings come alive, and then you need to start coding. And I started out, in 2001, I came out of art school. So I did that for a long time, and I'm the annoying one in a team that'll come back in the morning, I did it, and everybody goes like that. So I worked in the studio, Little Chicken Game Company. I helped found it. I'm one of the co-founders of it. I did that for 16, 17 years. And we did all kinds of things. Work for hire, educational games. We're from the Netherlands, so it was always, doing the other work. And even before the indie scene, or even before iPhones and self-publishing, that was a hard gig. And, so you just took on every job you can. In the end, we did Wrecked for Nintendo Switch and mobile, which is like a stunt racing game, and we did TrackLab VR for PlayStation. Was a PlayStation exclusive. So that all happened, but after I had a burnout at some point.
Sure.
And part of that was just the pressure of being in a business, which if you're not built for that, can be quite harrowing. Mm-hmm. The responsibilities, and that compounds over time. So I think many people, that's a very common narrative. And part of that, the other was that I was never, like I explained it, I was never the super bestest team player or a leader.
I was going to ask, like, through school, did your teacher always write, like, doesn't play well with others, like on your report card?
I enjoy people. I do. I'm not an antisocial person. I don't like waiting. And I don't like meetings, and I'll get fidgety, and there's all kinds of names for that type of behavior. But that's just who I am. So in the end, and it took me a long time to figure out that part of me was different than most people, and there's a reason we'd have a meeting, and after 10 minutes ago, okay, everybody understands what we're going to do? Okay, cheers, let's get to work. Mm-hmm. And everybody else was looking at me, this is the work. And we go, no, this meeting, we want to get out of the meeting. Don't you want to get out of the meeting? I want to get out of the meeting. And everybody went, dude, we don't understand what we need to do. And I'll go, I'll tell you while we're doing it. That is a sort of leadership by example that can get you quite far, but there are absolute limits to it. And nowadays things are so systemized. You have to, everybody wants to start their day with a scrum and a list, and where we're at, how are you, what's your user story like, and every day for me that was okay. Can we get that over with and get to the work
good stuff? Yeah,
get to the good, because I to be honest, I hated it. And it wasn't a healthy environment for me in that sense. Where it's great for other people, it wasn't great for me. So, and I had always been on the fringes doing my own stuff, just to, as a, how do you call it? A pressure valve, how do you call it? A release?
That's sure.
Just to get stuff out. So I'd been modding for Skyrim, that exploded at some point into a series of mods that had a couple of million views and places to go, okay, this is interesting.
What mod?
The Moonpath to Elsewhere mods for Skyrim.
Oh, nice.
The jungle themed mods, and everybody, he's been working on this for years. And I go, no. Figured it out like everybody else. And That was fun. Just I enjoyed doing that. So we were making some sort of kids RPG, and I thought, how do the big guys do? And I loved Skyrim. So, well, I'll open this creation kit, and then you just once you start doing it, you think, well, oh, that's clever. And one day I figured out how they did the snow, just a normal directional noise, basically on top of everything. And if I turn that yellow, it is sand. And then I went, if I turn it green, it's moss. And that went, boom. Let's make a jungle thing. And I made it, and that exploded. And I think I spent a year just doing that. And it was highly chaotic and very involved with users.
No, that's awesome. I remember that mod, actually. And I remember everyone's just elsewhere, right? That's because that's where the Geig are from and everything. And I was a big
Skyrim I just wanted to be, and I thought the Geig were cool, and the entire idea of elsewhere, which is just, I think, a fluke in the lore somehow, because it's so offbeat. I thought it'd be fun, and the entire thing was so unstructured that it was just, at the end, I apologize to everybody. Okay, there's not a super good story here. It's just, how do you call it? A little tourist holiday away from the cold.
So let me ask you, I mean, I got to make sure I don't spend the entire time talking to you about Skyrim and the elsewhere mods, but so on Falconeer, right? So obviously you strike me as someone who tons of energy, right? Lots of projects, lots of stuff being worked on. And I mean, you're also, from my understanding, from my notes here, the co-founder and creative director of Little Chicken Games and stuff like that. So just super busy dude. What parts of Falconeer didn't you yourself do? Did you outsource?
Oh yeah. Well, let's. I don't, the Little Chicken stuff I don't do anymore for a while now. So that's after the burnout. I figured I couldn't do that anymore. So that's where the Falconeer really came from. In the Falconeer, I can't do audio. I haven't got a musical bone in me. I love music, but I can't do that. So I work with Benedict Nichols, who also does the music for Omno and a couple of indie hits the last couple of years, and he's been doing an mind-boggling, crazy soundtrack with didgeridoos and Scottish bagpipes and Mongolian throat singing all mixed in, and it works. It's and people are liking it a lot in the game. So it's even that is sort of slightly off and different. I have someone since the last 2-3 months helping me specifically with the Xbox stuff, because that can be quite hermetic, which is a lovely word, but it's something I said at the beginning. I can make the game, but ask me to read through 300 pages of documentation on error coding. That becomes a chore for me. I'm not capable of. So whatever you do in life, there's always something you cannot do, and I can't do that stuff. So and Stefan Wijnker, so he's a fantastic developer. Worked on some Ace games, so he's helping me out, just making sure it runs well and behaves the way Microsoft wants it to do on all the Xbox stuff. Certification, that's what it's called.
Sure.
That's that, and then I have a fantastic publisher. Oh, I have people do voice acting. I don't do all the voice acting, and I have a fantastic publisher, Wired Productions, and I think they're sort of for a family anyway. So I've been treating them as my team. So nice. I'm pretty sure they have now dedicated staff to chat to me, because I don't have anybody else to chat to. So I guess that normally a publisher would, once a week have a meeting, but I've got, hey guys, and they have some fantastic producers, and they have a QA team there, which is very important, because so there's people testing the game every day, reporting back with bugs, issues. And that helps a lot. So I did a DevCon talk about it. So solo dev is a loaded term, because people said, I am standing on the shoulders of how many Unity developers are there? I don't know, hundreds, thousands probably.
Maybe close to
many.
Historically, I have no idea. A lot.
It's a lot. Zeros. Different cities in the world with Unity buildings. So that without that you can't do any of that.
Of course.
So, but within that framework, I do all the art for the game.
Solo-ish. I said solo-ish. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like people said, and then someone, people on the internet can say, well, it's bad because you're forgetting all the other people that support you, the marketing people, the QA, the localization, translation. I don't forget about that.
We'll take a moment right now to
I
say
understand
thank you
it's a
to
loaded
all
tool.
of those people.
Yeah, definitely. And those are all essential, and just like Unity is, because it's all part of the fact that Unity exists allows me to do this stuff, because that is a trend which you're going to see more as these as Unity and other tools get ridiculously powerful. You can see the expansion. You can see single or micro teams is the new word. Expand and do amazing things.
Right.
But they won't replace a AAA studio, because the scope of what you're doing always then for me has to be making smart choices and do things differently, because the classical way of doing things is not an option. I can't have a team doing onboarding or signposting or doing tutorials.
Of course.
And I always have to make the distinction. Am I going to do a tutorial or do another story mission? And I'll always add more gameplay or some big art thing, because that's it's more fun.
That's right. Speaking of which, though, let's take some time. We've been talking about the game. Tell me about the Falconeer. Like what's the game like?
So the Falconeer it's when I had one failed indie game after I had my burnout and stuff, and I figured I want to do things by myself after the mod. Called Oberon Scored, which was a strategy game, and it was very dark because I was, recovering from a burnout, so it was bleak as
cathartic.
Cathartic, but it's very beautiful, and it had no textures. It was the start of my art style, and it was truly an artistic, its own thing. And I worked on that for a couple of years, and then I didn't work on it anymore, and I sort of left it. And then when I was back in a better place in my life, I looked at it and said, this is bleak. This is
what was I thinking?
What was I thinking? And you can still find trailers of it online and on YouTube. It looks great, but it's very dark. So I had a look at that. And I thought, that felt painful to touch after having dealt with issues. Then going back to something you made in a dark place isn't always. Sometimes
fun.
you just want to dig a hole, throw it in there for a couple of years, and just go. I'm moving on. So I thought, but I did want to do something by myself, and I did think that ultimately that was where I wanted to be, and it's where I ended up. So that was the goal. So I had a good think of. I had a look at the assets I had left, because there was like a couple of years of art in that, and I thought, okay, so there's some landscapes I could use, and I had some fun with that. And then I just, in my mind, I went back to the games I played when I was young and growing up. Because, when you grow older, when you're in the business, I do still play games. But I have so little time and patience. I tend to go for the tentpole, the Cyberpunks or the Witcher.
Sure.
And I don't... You miss out on a lot of that, initial amazement you have at the first time you had... And that, for me, were the flying games. So I can still remember the feeling I had of, Comanche, if you remember that, from the 90s or 80s or whenever, I don't know. Those first voxel games, and you're flying your little chopper through the canyons. I can still have that feeling, or Red Baron when it came out. Shera and Dynamics made flight sim games. And I could the tangible excitement you had when, I'm getting a CGA graphics card. I don't know if they were called graphics card, but a monitor. I think back in the days it was all about the monitors you had. I'm getting a CGA monitor in 4 months, and I can play Red Barons in 14 colors or whatever it was, 16 colors or something.
The first time you got a joystick to play a flying game.
The first time you had a joystick.
And it's like, this is the next level.
And I remember Chuck Yeager Air Combat, and you could pick your own missions, and you say, I'll fly against 3 FO-104s, and it had all these times. And I always enjoyed the World War II stuff and the World War One, because it's slower and it's close up, and you're zooming through the, and then you always made sure the combat was really close to the ground, so you could zoom back to that simplified square barn or whatever signified the mountain in that era. Up to things like Crimson Skies or TIE Fighter, which had these epic stories within flying genres. So I went, okay, those are, to me, archetypical game sensations. They are primal in a way, just flying. So and I went, isn't that too simple? Isn't that overdone? And I had a look and I realized, okay, flying is coming back because I'd been playing War Thunder and was on the waiting list for Elite Dangerous, and so that some of this is stuff. People but there's no Crimson Skies. There's no actual flying fantasy flying games or something that takes you to this new world. And I thought, well, okay. That's good. I'll do something with that. And then the other bit is I make landscapes. So I realized that all the landscapes I make are often an expression of myself. And it's the thing I just, I think I'm the game equivalent to a landscape painter, maybe.
Okay.
With fantastical landscapes, often, quite dark or moody.
I'll come back to that because I actually have a question about one of the landscapes, but keep going.
All right. So, and I thought, okay, landscapes, flying, that makes sense, because that's what I learned from the Moonpath. People really enjoyed taking a ride in my imagination, but then the gameplay for Skyrim wasn't ideal for that. I had to, there were airships in that mod, but they were just like a door you would open and you'd be in another place.
Right.
So I went, okay, I'll do that. And having done Skyrim, I'll do it open world. So it's an open world flying game with epic landscapes, and it will have to do combat, intense combat, because otherwise,
and you'll be a bird.
Initially I had a dragon. And people always go, "Why isn't a dragon? I want Panzer Dragoon in the open world. Panzer Dragoon, give me open world." But that's been done, and I felt if you start going out, I think a trap is. You want to make what you enjoy. If you enjoy Skyrim, you want to make Skyrim. That is such a close emotion to me. I thought, well, I'll have to fight it. And I have to make something that's original or non-existent. And then if I stick with that, it'll at least be something new you're delivering. It's something people haven't directly seen or not seen in a long time in this case. So I thought, well, okay, we did the dragon. And I looked at the dragon and thought, yeah, okay. Then I made the bird. With a dude on top, with a gun. And I thought, that works. I never
realized how much I wanted to be a bird with lasers on my back until I played Falconeer. And then I'm just like,
me neither. I just made it. And then I did the flapping animation after a lot of research. And I thought, oh, this is nice. And I put that in the world I had. And I went flying around and it had a sunrise. I went, wow, this is so positive. So aspirational, off into the world. And I went, yeah, that's not going to work. So that's where I said, well, we'll need to all that, flying away, you can hear the bells ringing nearly. You need a dark counterpoint. So that's where the idea of making an ocean world, which is practical as well, but it's to have this darkness, things happening underwater, secrets, trying to grab you back from whatever you're trying to escape.
You have to stay in the air. There's no safe landing. It's an ocean.
There's no safe landing. Yeah, so that's... so I thought, well, that's it. And I do things fairly... subconsciously, I think most people do. And I have a look at it once I first made it, went, okay, that's lovely. Because there's, a guy on a bird trying to take off and fly off. And then there's this ocean trying to, full of secrets, trying to hold on to you. I thought that's nice. That's my personal journey as well, trying to get away from whatever's unhealthy, from whatever your choices in the past, but realizing you can't because there's always
something,
strings attached to whatever you do. And that became the Falconeer. That is... literally it was a demo and a bird with a dragon that became a bird. and then I just set out. I just started making it, and I had no big plan. You just do it. You have sort of an idea where you want to go, and you just follow what.
Yeah, and interestingly about that, you're talking about like maybe you didn't have a plan and stuff like that, and normally during like these podcasts, I always ask like, who's your target gamer? Like, who did you make this? Like, describe the person who would love this the most. And you have an interesting thing. So normally I like try to throw a name out, like describe this person. But in this case, you were telling me you made it for you. So describe Tomas.
Yeah, it is me. I didn't want to, because I'd work for hire, and then you're always making it for someone. And you're making someone's idea, or you're making it for a specific person. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And because it is an expressive game, everything. That's the thing I realized. If left alone, I'll make something that's personal to me. And I realized that's fine. That's actually quite nice and beautiful. And I got a sneaky suspicion that if you do that, and you do it based on an emotion or an experience that resonates with other people, which isn't your private hell, but is something, we can apply, trying to get away from something and to a better place, but not succeeding. Is such a universal theme. Things become more enjoyable because, you realize someone else made it. It's like the different... I'm thinking a lot about machine learning recently. It's saying, if you have machine-made music, it does nothing for you. It has no soul. For music, you always want to hear a musician. So I think the same thing goes for games. I'm convinced of it. If you can feel the maker or feel that someone placed that fortress there or that castle and there's a certain vibe to it, it becomes more powerful. Or more human, let's put it like that.
There's a lot of that juxtapositioning. Yeah, so do I. But describe Thomas, right? But actually, you could definitely feel a lot of that juxtapositioning, right? Like you could see the sun and it's hitting the clouds, and there's that brightness, but then there's the dark ocean, or even the way like you refill your lasers by flying into storm clouds to collect the lightning, and then but if it gets too dangerous, you got to dive out of the way, and or you're always like. You dive to get your energy back, but climbing takes some energy, so it's a fine balance of... There's a lot of balance play in the game, I felt like.
Yeah, it's I don't know how that happened. So like I think that was your question. There's no game design document. It's not the hair, but sometimes I feel like Bob Ross, where you just want to explore where something takes you.
A happy little falcon.
A happy little falcon, happy little cloud, and then next I'll make a dark little castle, and then the dark little castle will have a half-broken boat because someone died there. And I'll have these little stories I'm making, and I think for someone like me, where I am distracted quite often, and I sometimes that really works against you, and you need to. I'm 42, so you've developed a half a lifetime of tricks to deal with that, but it all comes down with short-term rewards. You got to do something that makes you happy, that gives you that buzz, that adrenaline, and then you can go on and on and on and on. And then once it drops off, I'll lose it or get tired. So when you're exploring like that, exactly like that, I've spent so much time making the art style super fast so I can put something in the world. It's very tech art oriented, and it will immediately look good. So I'll make a little town, and then I'll go, okay. But so this is where the king lives or the baron. So where do the people live? Well, they need to live at the bottom. So I'll make a little shanty town, and I'll say, well, they'll have the dockyards, and then they'll have a little crane. And then I can look at it after a day and say, wow, that's an enjoyable little place. And that is, I think, a sort of a Bob Ross creative loop where you get satisfied and then you can move on. And so that's the majority of how that world creates. It's just me needing a momentary trigger, and then in between that I can have a couple of hours every day where I go, okay, now every little dock needs to hold a ship that doesn't clip through the dock. Okay, well, I have to write some code for that. So that's and then where does the balancing stuff? It's usually because I go, I'll make this, and then I've made it, and I go, ooh, doesn't really work. I have to counter that. So there's also lots of mechanics I've never used again. That was one of your questions, sorry. But there's little fish in the world. At one point, I made fish that dove out of the water. And I thought, that's enjoyable. How about you pick them up and sacrifice them at a shrine, and you'll get a nice RPG-like boost above. And I did that, and then I thought, and then I started fighting, and I added fighting a couple of months later, and it was completely useless, because you had to leave the fight, go somewhere, land, which you can't do in combat, otherwise they'll shoot you while you're on the perch. So it wasn't working. So I just make it an instant boost, and I've left it. I thought I'll add some auto heal to everything. So there's lots of... But I left it in there because the fish look nice, and you can still pick it up.
I picked up a fish, and I was like, what do I do with this fish
now? You can eat it with the bombing button, and it'll give you a boost, but it's not, it's sort of... I love when people in your game, because I do that, they can fly around, and then, can I pick up a fish? And then you do it, and you go, wow, that's really nice. That works.
I've got a fish.
That is the gaming suspension of disbelief, is that you can have a thought, act on it, and the game will respond to that. And you can fail many a times, but occasionally you got to give the player somewhere where he goes, that's nice. That's a world, basically.
Yeah. Well, and as you led kind of me into it, right? So there's that question of, you had mentioned a lot of mechanics that you tried and ultimately didn't keep, or even just gameplay elements or features of the game. Like, what were some of the examples? Like, what were some of the things that you tried and just didn't work out? Or
So the healing, instant healing or whatever, healing through, potions or anything just didn't work. And that's why most action games nowadays or third person have an auto heal or regeneration, because it doesn't take you out of the action, but you still have to momentarily find a safe place to recoup a little bit. So that was a big one. I added that, and that changed a lot of things. So what else did we? There's lots of creatures I've left.
You mentioned a kraken before.
There's a half-made kraken in there. There's gifs on the internet, and it'll come up out of water, and it'll grab a ship, and then it'll explode and pull down the ship. I'll add it back, but I couldn't get it to be fun. So, then if the people testing it go, well, it's rather annoying rather than fun. You have to just leave it. So I'm leaving it because the game needs a bloody kraken. So we will have it.
The world needs a kraken.
There is some mosasaurs in there, called mosaurs in the world. Mm-hmm. They're swimming around. They're not doing much, but they were intended to be, enemies for when you're escorting trading ships. So you can chat with some of the traders, and they'll give you some money if you escort them. It was intended to have lots of different challenges than the dog fighting. Mm-hmm. So I left those because, in the end, it became very repetitive. And, that's what you don't... It's always a danger when you're by yourself and you're focused on one mechanic. But this was supposed to be a diversion, and it wasn't working. The escort's still there, but it's actually there for people who want to have the pacifist way of making money. It's they're nice. They're still open-world enemies, but often enough you'll find an escort that's just non-violent, and that'd be cool. So... the dinosaurs are still in the world, or they're not, swimming lizards, to find for people.
Nice.
Somewhere north.
Okay. Keep an eye open.
They're for the screenshots. For photo mode.
And then you had mentioned one I thought was kind of fun, like, this whole, idea of looping and, looking at birds in flight.
God, yeah. So, I think people sometimes go, you made this all by himself, and I do all the code and the art and the animation. But I think what I'm best at is knowing what I cannot do. Mm-hmm. So I will never segue into a corner where I can't code or art myself out of. Mm-hmm. I think that's experience and luck, but mostly just, having the experience of field so often. I got a good sense when something is too much for me. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing loopings in flight mechanics, the math for that requires you actually to use quaternion math. Otherwise, you go up and it can go this way. And I don't understand quaternion math. I understand it well enough that I don't want to touch it. So I kept away from it, and that's why there is no looping birds in the game. Because birds can loop in real life. They can do little tumbles, and they do all the weird things when they're trying to find mates or fighting each other. They do. If you look on YouTube, there's insane things birds can do. So I left that out, and it makes everything lots easier. So it makes your AI easier, because you can just, you can make your AI two-dimensional with a little up-down for aiming. But mostly it's focused in the plane. And that's a lot easier to do. It's a lot easier to debug.
Oh, yeah.
So that's definitely, those choices you have to make. Another big one, which people are wondering, there's some fast travel to help you out there, but there's no quick save feature. So there's missions, they don't last too long. They're 10 minutes at most. But if you die, you have to start the mission over. That means if I had added a checkpoint system or anything, the permutations of, this, now I'm doing mission 12, halfway from this checkpoint, there's 3 enemies, there's an escort there, they were fighting, I have to rebuild all that. It becomes a much more difficult task, and then you need a lot more testing, because you got to test all those possible checkpoints. And when you're doing something by yourself, that's where you got to say, I'm not going to do that, because that's a rabbit hole you're not going to come out of. That's digging your own trap. So I think that's a essential trait for me, at least, is to know, because what will happen if I go down such a hole and I can't fix it? I'll get out of it. I'll at some point my brain doesn't compute anymore. I'll get slightly annoyed. I can't find the energy and the concentration to do the research to fix it. And then I'll be stuck for a week, whatever, in some sort of writer's block.
Which it's good that you recognize that. Yeah.
That took a lot of pain to recognize that, but and it's happened in here as well. So that is things so that's what you do. You figure out what you're not good at, and then you don't do that.
I wouldn't feel so bad about the Quaternion stuff, though. I don't understand Quaternions either. I joke that there's two types of people in the world: those who understand Quaternions and those that tell the truth.
I know two people at my old studio who understand Quaternions, and they spend their spare time calculating that if the universe is a simulation, where is the code optimization, and how could you trigger massive code optimization in a simulated universe? And they had entire. So that's the people who understand Quaternions.
Nerds. No, I'm joking.
They're not nerds. They're actual mathematical geniuses. Not I am. I have so I don't have that comprehension. Everything I do is, how do you call it? Cold hard. Bashing your head against the wall, trial and error development.
You learned it on the streets.
Yeah, learned it on the streets.
That's right.
I don't know, sorry.
No, that's fair.
Streetwise coding, it's like, I'll show people my code one day. We'll do a talk and I'll show the actual code when I started, and when a year or 2 years later, it got a lot better. It's still... Stefan, so he helps me, and I said, this doesn't work, and I'll ask you... And I said, how did you solve that? Well, I did this. He said, wow, that's super. I've never seen anybody solve it that way, but it's super functional.
Yeah, if it works, it works, right?
And then he goes, you knew there was just a function for that, right? And I did not know.
That's always what happens. No, I did not.
I'll make a tweet one day. So I made an Xbox launch game, but I have no idea what a singleton is. So that
Well, let me ask you this, as far as kind of figuring out for yourself and doing this stuff yourself, you had mentioned before you had this sort of art style, right? And your game has no textures. And why is that? What was the deciding decision behind that?
Well, visually, so there was a period, I know, kind of hard to grab it, but I think when Radiosity Rendering became available, this is before Blender, when everybody's still using Maya and VS Max and stuff, where the first Radiosity renders became available. And anybody was doing modeling, and this was before sculpting and stuff, and then doing these gray renders of their model with Radiosity turned on. Everything looks really photorealistic, but just gray. And there was a trend for a couple of years, so 2008 or 9, I'm just saying. When we got, portfolios in, or you'd look online, stuff you'd admire, people were doing that. I think sometimes they still do it. Well, probably not since Substance and stuff. But I always realized, wow, there's nothing there. There's just the geometry. I thought that was really attractive.
Very
minimalistic, and it always appealed to me. So after the Skyrim, which involved an ungodly amount of normal maps and understanding shaders and stuff, I thought, well, I can use all that tech, and then if I don't use any textures, let's see what it looks like. So I just started doing it because it showed off the models. And in the first game that Oberon scored, I still used just silhouetted characters because that was hot by then. But the world was all just very simple geometry. And I did a blog on that. It's still online. So I think something about untextured stuff or something. On how I specifically do it. But I realized that if I model something and use smoothing groups, which nobody uses anymore because you're just sculpting or something, but it's old. Underneath all that, you can have, like a pyramid has, a 4 face, well, excluding the bottom, but it has 4 faces, 4 triangles. And each has a smoothing group so that there's sharp line. So imagine you turn that into a mountain, and then instead of what people often do with the low poly style is you show all the edges and all the faces. So it becomes like a little bit in low poly. You see it becomes faceted. Yeah, hard edge. But you can also say, well, some edges remain smooth and they'll become like sculpted strips. And I started moving those together. I thought, wow, that's called in 3ds Max, which I was using back then, was called smoothing groups, and that worked fantastic in Unity. And then with all the shader stuff I'd learned, and then back when you had Strumpy shader editor, I think was big before Shader Graph people. And I just experimented with edges and lighting, and then I thought, well, I can have grid. At some point, I realized, and now everybody who study for this stuff knows this, but I had no idea, is that you can take the UV chord, so you can map something and just mathematically make that a gradient. It's just, U up and go from 1 to 0, and you lerp it between two colors. And so I thought, okay, I'll make, my little mountain brown at the bottom, yellow at the top. And then I started fooling around with vertex colors, painting a little bit and merging that. And it looked really weird and different. And it just looked so nice. And absolutely... So people say, well, you do it because it's easy or it makes you fast. No, I spent just getting this stuff to do a day-night cycle. I think there's a year of work just in the Falconeer day-night cycle. It's from other games as well. Just something that grew as I coded it into... with all the shading and stuff in the world. So it's tech art wise, you put all the effort up front and not in the art itself. So I just like the way it looks. It looks fantastic. It's like because in gaming we hate hard edges, because we've all used we used the game at 720 or when I was 640 480. CRT tubes, and if you had an edge like this, it would jaggy as heck. So we've all been taught that we use normal maps and anti-aliasing, and everything needs to blend and be like a photograph. And this is all hard edges. It's edges all over the place. Oh, not everywhere, not in the clouds, not in the ocean, but all the geometry is quite harsh. I just like it.
Yeah,
it appeals to
me.
And
that
fact,
juxtapositioning again, that balance of the soft sky and water, and then hard edges on your surfaces.
Well, it is about contrast. It is being a contrarian, probably. But I don't know if that's good or wrong board, but sounds appropriate. So
no, that's correct.
No connotations there, but it just spoke to me, and I like now that people have attacked me on it as well. Because it is doing things, less with more, more with less, basically. It's just, keeping it as simple as possible. And you can see how I made stuff. So you can see some things are just cubes. You can see it. Or edges. You can see. But now I go, I like it. You can see who I made it. It's not, some anonymous warehouse of 3D artists in China.
It was intentional.
It's not a group of people. It's just... that's me. So we're having this discussion with each other between the game. You're playing it, I made it, but you can see what I did. And I thought it's something we never do in games. We always try to hide that, it's not reality. But my partner, she's a ceramics artist, and she always says, you want to see, when you buy a piece of art,
brush strokes. That's how you
want to see the brush strokes,
yeah.
Because it's another human being that made it.
Yeah.
Because it's you were trying to cross that bridge of shared humanity, if you will, which just sounds already pretentious. Sorry for that. It's all stuff I figured out and learned from other places, and I thought I just like it. I can't give any. I just like the way it looks, and the other thing it does, it forces me to do things differently, which I like even more, because it gives me that momentary kick to get going and keep my focus. It's different. So when you set out to, let's see, that's a good example. I had to, at some point I had to make a GUI bar. Just something that fills up. And I didn't use texture, but that's not everybody does that. You use the UV chords and a gradient, and you cut it off. And then I thought, okay, but I want it to be moving. Normally I'd use like an image sequence or something just to have that fluid. I thought I'll add a sine wave to that little top half, and I add a fluid, and I'll move that in the shader. I'll have a fluid without any textures, just based on a gradient. You've one like this, and then you've one like that, just with math. I went, whoa, this is and it looked different. It was smoother. There's no frames dropping and stuff. So it forces you to do things in a new way, and that that's just super enjoyable. And then when you look at it, you say, this looked different. And then going back to that Bob Ross style working, you get triggered by something because you've not seen it done that way, and you want to do more of it or explore it, and then you just dive in.
So let me ask,
any sense to anybody? But
absolutely. Well, some of the better, so I used to be a prototype gameplay programmer and whatever, and you'd encounter this mistake almost that ended up being like really cool, and you're like, wait a minute, let's dig into that. And then like this thing, I did some math wrong or whatever, this thing exploded, and it was just like, but that was actually kind of neat. Maybe we could build a platformer with these explosions and do. So I totally get it.
It is
happy accidents. Bob Ross.
Yeah, and it is why you become, I think, a prototype developer or someone at that early stage of game development, because your mind will come up, with these creative ideas based on the input you are getting, instead of having to sit down at the desk and I want this to happen, or I think I read an interview with what's the guy from Game of Thrones? I forget his name. The writer.
J.R. No, that's not him.
No, not
R.R. Martin, George R.R. Martin.
R.R. Martin. So, and he said there's two types of writers. Or maybe he was quoting someone. I don't know. But he said there's architects and then there's gardeners. And I thought, wow, that's the same for games. There's architects and there's gardeners. I'm definitely not an architect. I'm a gardener. I will plant the seed, grow it, see what happens, maybe add something, see where it takes me. And there's people who sit down with. I've met these people. They exist with a giant spreadsheet of a game, everything thought out, with books and dummies, and go, and I'm amazed you have to, that's amazing to me, because I never have the, the mental capacity to, to get that.
So let me ask you something then, besides the fact that we totally butchered that author's name, but so there was one part of the level, and I'm just curious the story of it. No one listening to this is going to have any idea what I'm talking about until you play the game. But there's one part called the Maw. And I am really curious about that part of the map.
Okay, so yeah, well, the Maw is where... so the Maw is interesting from many perspectives. So I set out to make an ocean world.
No one's seen it. The water kind of...
Yeah, it's
drops, and then there's just an area where the water is not there. It's weird.
It's one of those things where I was following a hunch, and then it became integral to the story. So I don't write lore. I'm not that. The lore itself follows from what I needed it to do. So people are saying that's fantastic lore. That's a great compliment, and I think many people say that you can't write a story based on lore. You write the story, and then the lore supports that. But this is. Then include gameplay, for instance. So I had this water world, and which is easy because then you don't have to make the entire landmass. And two things were happening. I was getting lost, and I was listening to a Star Wars music. I was going, I need a trench run. So there's two things that was happening. So I was getting lost, and I need a trench run or a canyon run, because you kind of can't have a flying game without a canyon run, really. So those two things were in my mind, and I don't know why I started to experiment with how about if I made a depression, or I sometimes I'll say it and it sounds ridiculous. I'll not dream about it, but I'll wake up with something. I go, I'll make a water canyon. I have no other explanation. It's just something is digested, it's gestating, and then you wake up and I go, yes, flying eels. And I go, so I went out and it said, okay, well that's out. And the thing is, so that's why there is the Maw. I had that, so that was for fun. I needed a canyon for gameplays, and I also needed a giant landmark to break up the world, where if you flew long enough in a direction, you'd find this landmark you could follow to your faction's home, and it would provide a marker on the map in the world. Of course, if you flew up and you were above it, you would still, but it'll be a marker. So I made it really big. So I think if you before I added fast travel options and stuff and made upgrades, it took me about 7 minutes to run the entire length. So it's a decent size obstacle. So I made it, and it's a wonderful bit of tech art. So from a technical standpoint, the ocean. I don't know if this is interesting to people, but
I was curious how you did the
okay,
the curvature
so
of the
ocean itself. When you make these types, it's an infinite ocean. So the ocean doesn't exist. It's just a triangle ahead of the camera. So a frustum-based ocean, if you were, with different, with a degrading tessellation, basically. So it's got less triangles in the end and more up close. So here's the camera, and then there's So it's like. I just rendered it. Well, it's just a sort of a triangle-shaped thing that's stuck to the camera, and I calculate where it needs to be. Nothing fancy. But how do you then depress that based on something which is bigger than that single square which is on screen, which goes on, practically to the horizon? So I made it I made some world-based shaders, and of course it's sine waves based on the world space, and nowadays hardwares can do that. So if you're into shaders, world-based precision shaders are
you heard it.
They are fantastic, and you could do crazy stuff. So I had that giant trench, and that was fun. I put rocks in it, and thought, okay, that works. And then my brain, I don't know. I sometimes I'll just go, I need a aqueduct. If there's a trench, I want, and then things from a tech art standpoint become quite annoying, because then that finite plane in front of the camera, you're going to intersect with another plane that needs to be seamlessly matched. I did see a bug in that yesterday, by the way. Okay. But then, there's a number of, so that is the same shader. It's a plane, and it connects with the water, is displaced the same way. And then there's an aqueduct town built around it.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I
liked it. I pulled up the map. I'm like, what's that thing? I gotta go check that thing out. And
that's what it's there for. And there's once you get into the story, there's temples that come out of the water where there's giant circles of water. Where I'm using the same trick, but then animated in a circle. There's holes in the water, because I read on, and someone said, well, the walkway down in what was it, BioShock, the first one where you go down into the ocean, is the most difficult trick in game development. No, it's not. We just cut a hole in the water. Okay, so I had to do that. So there's holes. So then I started making tunnels under the water. I thought that's funny. So there's lots of things where I'll just go not to amuse myself, but the little crossroads that are exciting and rewarding, I can go into, and I'll make those, and I'll have fun with that. And then that led to an entire faction having to live there, and why did they live there, and I have to explore all that. So
awesome. That's cool how those just evolve.
It just evolves. Yeah, I think that the for me that going like this is easy. Then going back down to where it's finished is hard.
Of course. Actually, along those lines, what's your favorite mechanic in the game? Because there's quite a few little things in there that are pretty neat. I'm curious.
There's a thing I'm really proud of that I got it to work, and there's one that's really important for the game, which is very simple, and that's the rolling. So if you hold down the dash button and you
you got to do a barrel roll if it's a flying game. You got to do a barrel.
Well, it does more than initially. I didn't have it. I had straight sort of inspired by World War II, turning battles. And a friend of mine, Tim, he posted, I hope it's not, you find a way out of these eternal, turning battles that flight games always get stuck into. And I felt, being a bit of a flight buff, that's what dogfighting is about, is finding a way out, it's a turning battle. But fair enough. And I thought, well, okay. And I saw a picture of a bird doing it, and I thought, we can do a barrel roll. So a pilot told me it's an aileron roll, but it's we have no aileron, so to me it's a barrel roll. But it's a roll. It's a roll. I listened. It's called a roll in the game, not a barrel roll. So, and I made it, and then I had seen people playing Rocket League a lot. And the thing they were doing, which I like, was it felt like if you pick up a control, they're throwing around the car. It's like you're fighting physically, throwing it around. So I added the roll, and then when you're in a roll, you can throw the bird around. So initially, if you just press it, it'll become like a strafe to the left or the right. Mm-hmm. But if you hold it really back, it'll turn faster, and you can do like a 180.
Like a handbrake.
Yeah, like a handbrake turn. And the moment I added that, I went, okay, this is it. I can now flip air combat. I can do stuff I couldn't do. And that's where the energy started. Okay, you have to build up the energy to be able to do that. Otherwise, it's... so that's where things are... And the first time I showed it to people at an indie show, I had people play it. I was quite nervous because that it might not be fun. I'm asking quite a lot from the dig, but people got it. They enjoyed the fact that there was these limitations there that forced you to think about your energy or where you started. So that's something that I think that was important to me, to take it from just a demo, a straight sort of an air combat demo. Going, okay, because it's a bird, I can do different things than an airplane can do. And the other system, which I'm proud of, because like I said, I am a systematic person. I just don't have the energy to make very complicated. Well, at some point I told my family and my partner, said, okay, I'm going to have to spend 3 months and making a mission system and a system, a modular damage system for enemies. And I hate it. I got to do it, and I will be. It is the heaviest thing I will do. And it has, yeah.
That's it, but you did it, yeah.
Yeah, you have to. Well, that's where I think it could have failed if I wasn't capable of doing that. I was pretty anxious about, first having a proper mission system, and then you got to spawn stuff, and that, but you have to sit down and make the base for it, the architecture that works, and then I did the system where you have a damage object. So there's a class. Let's call it the module. For who am I? What faction am I? Then there's faction. How much health have I got? Then there's a bit that does receiving of the damage, because you can receive damage even if you're not part of a faction, maybe a creature or something. So I've made all these systems, and then they all have the same structure. So really nicely structured, probably object-oriented, whatever you want to call it. A system for the enemies, and where I could say, okay, this hull is a airship, and it has all the same elements as a turret, except the turret doesn't have any steering or physics. But when it explodes, it'll explode, it'll fall down, all of that. And I started combining those and fixing it so it would work. So I could say, well, okay, here's a turret that's part of a gantryway that has the same damage, so I can shoot out the gantryway and then the turret will fall down. Once I had all that, many people won't even find it, but you can sub-target every bit of some of the airships and stuff, and have fun with it. Take down the steam, the steamer pipes, and the ship will slow down. Shoot down all its turrets, and they'll go critical and do splash damage if you're lucky, and that'll destroy more turrets, so you can one-shot a ship if you sort of soften it up. That is a hugely complicated system to make and debug, and then initialize properly. So that was a huge learning experience, and I'm quite proud that's functional. It took a bit of work, but yeah, you made it, and it makes it. For me, that was a step that might seem easy to a normal, to a seasoned programmer. But being also an artist and wanting things to explode and roll and do things in a certain way, to have that, it elevates it from a single person experiment or playground into something that can have layered gameplay. I think that's I enjoyed. I was glad it was done, but it is the core of the game, and it's yeah.
Fair enough. Awesome.
Proud of having made it.
We're getting close on time. I've got just a couple more questions for you here. This has been awesome. So one of the things I try to ask, and I think you're going to have a very interesting answer here. So in this journey, this solo-ish game dev journey of building this thing, what would you say the most important thing you learned was that you would express to other people?
For me, it's I think being all the technical stuff and learning how publishers work or localization or all the stuff, I had to learn by myself, or writing. I really enjoy writing now. That's a new thing. But I think what for me, which is unique to me, or no, it is definitely not unique. It is a indie thing which I admire and which inspired me, is the fact that you can make something that is expressive of yourself in a game, and be a expressive work of art, if you will. Even without being pretentious or anything. That is, every other creative endeavor known to man has done that, except in gaming. And indies before me have done it and shown the way. And for me, the breakpoint was when after the game I never finished, is when my partner said, "Oh, and that Oberon, that creature that's being squeezed with the giant hand, that's you, right?" And I went, No, that's not how gaming works. It's just a cool backdrop, and it's just a character, and it looks cool. And then I went, my Raymond. Yeah, that is me. And so I think that I was 38 when I figured out, as an artist, as a visual designer, that's what I do when let loose. I think so it's a compliment to everybody who's been doing that in when they built the indie scene, to showcase that is possible. And I think that's what you want to give forward, that we're living in a time where someone like me can do that. And there's so many ways doing that, and I think I do it, and before people think it's an artsy game, I enjoy doing it within the vocabulary of an action game that is a good action game. So I respect the fact that it's a game. I didn't want to do a non-gamey expressive things, but I think if you want to make something, if you just look, take all the inspiration you can from everything you see and play, but then go inside yourself and find the experiences that you share with other people, and take that as your inspiration for telling your story or the world you build. Because people want to go into worlds with which they can connect. They might not know it, but you want to feel the hand of the person that made it and share some sort of some resonance. I like resonance as a word. So don't imitate. You don't need to imitate, or just why do you love something is more interesting question than I love that and I want to make that. So why do you love it, and why what's happening inside you is the interesting bit. That sounds all maybe because I had the flu or something, but that a little bit metaphysical. But
sure, whatever. You can wax poetic. That's fine. It's your game. You do whatever you want, man.
It is. It is. But it's because it's done now. Is that I can look at it. I have no idea where I am. I'm floaty up here. People are liking it, not liking it. It's a launch title for Xbox. So I'm pretty out of it. Let's be honest.
No, well, you finish line, man. You deserved it, right? It's always hard to get to that spot. Like you just said too. Launch title on Xbox Series X. There's no question there. I just wanted to call it out because I think it's super cool.
Yeah, me too. I'll be in that shop buying it, people. Yeah, I'll go to my local game store and buy it.
Nice. So. Where can people find this game, the Falconeer?
It's out the 10th. If you go out to your store, there's a physical Day 1 edition, which is the box edition, which you can buy when you pick up your Series S, which is fantastic, or Series X.
Yeah, by the time people are actually listening to this, it's out now, right?
You can just understand. It's on Steam. It's on GOG. How do we call that? I call it GOG, but it's on GOG, Steam, any
Day 1 physical copies.
Day 1 physical copies. It should be everywhere.
Nice. Awesome. Definitely worth checking out. So, last question for you here. What's next? You seem like someone who has a project. Always got a project going. What's next?
Yeah, well, I've already got I've got the visual for the. So I just working stuff I dream up. So I've got the visual for the sequel. I'm keeping it to myself, but it's going to be slightly weird.
Two-headed bird.
No, it's gonna have birds, but I'm gonna add. There are. I just combined. So there's so. I'll hint. So the Falconeer one is about warbirds and birds, but it's also about my love for sailing boats and steam vessels and all things nautical. Let's just say I love other things like that, and they'll be in the next game. But first I got to make a lot of DLC, and there's pirate stuff that needs to get added, and people can expect a lot more just from the base edition. So I won't be starting that for a year.
Awesome. Well, again, then again, watch out there. The game, no, it's all right. It's all right. So again, the game Falconeer, talking here with Tomas Sala. Thank you so very much for talking with us today. It's been great having you. Anything else you want to say to the folks listening?
No.
Fair enough. All right. Thanks, everyone. Another episode of Unity Behind the Game. Again, Falconeer. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of it.
Thank you.